And on today, I'm so happy to have several panelists with us on today. Montrell Morin, attorney Amy Griffin, Reverend Dr. Kerry Johnson, LaVonna Jenkins, and Kenneth Taylor. And looking forward to this conversation on today, which will take us through several different entities in terms of what we are doing, where we are, and what is needed in terms of being able to have this conversation on today. So definitely want to welcome you, and you who are joining us on today. And thank you all for being a part of this on today. Let us open up with a word of prayer. God, we thank you on today, dear God, for your spirit of love, your spirit of mercy, dear God, and allowing us to see another day. So on today, dear God, we ask that you use each one of us, dear God, in a special way, dear God. Use this panel right now, dear God, to be able to push through uncomfortable places, dear God, to places of healing, places of hope, dear God, places of having a future, dear God. And while we realize that we celebrate life, dear God, and never like to say goodbye, part of how we plan, dear God, and part of even what you've told us in our word, dear God, to be able to have an inheritance for your children, dear God, and your children's children is part of what we need to do. So help us to be able to push through pain, even places that may be a little dark, that we may find hope, we may find comfort, we may find peace in you. So use everyone, dear God, on this panel on today. And we ask that you continue to bless and keep. And we ask it all now in the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Definitely want to welcome everyone again. I want to thank our panelists for joining us on today as well. Definitely glad to have each and every one of them on with us on today. Again, as I have mentioned, we have Montrell Moran, who is with us, who is an insurance specialist. We have attorney Amy Griffin, who will help us with some of the legacy planning that is there. Again, as I mentioned, we will have Reverend Dr. Kerry Johnson, who is a part of having a healthcare plan conversation. We have LaVonna Jenkins, who will help us with the funeral aspect, and then Mr. Kenneth Taylor, who will help us with disposition of our final remains. And before we get started on today, I do want to kind of start us off with a poll on today and to really look at several things as we do move forward and being able to kind of consider some things as we start off. So I'm going to start off with a question on today. And for those that are not calling in, you are able to see the questions that will come up on the screen. And I want to also remind our folks that are joining us that have called in, if you do have questions towards the end, you can use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself at the appropriate time. But I'm getting ready to share a question just to be able to help us understand who is with us on today, and give us about a minute to try and answer this. And you should see a question up on your screen, and feel free, please, to go ahead on and answer that. And don't worry, it's anonymous, so we won't tell your exact age, and we left some brackets up there for everybody. Give you guys another few seconds. Looks like we've had some pretty good responses there. Another 10 seconds. Okay, so just so we can kind of know where folks are on today, it looks like we do have a few that are falling in the 30 to 39 category. Quite a few in the 40 to, should have had 50, not 59 category. We have a few in the 50 to 59, 60 to 69, 70, 79, and 80, 89. And we do at Zion, and we're very fortunate to have, I believe, 4 disciples currently that are over 100. So I did want to leave that as an option to be able to see how many we have in the different demographics. And that'll help even our panelists to understand some of the market of who they're talking to on today. So with that, and with no further ado, I want to bring up first on today, Mr. Montrell Moran, who is with us on today to be able to kind of talk about financial considerations as we move about in this thing called life, and looking at legacy and how we will move forward. And I'm definitely glad to be able to have him with us on today. He brings a wealth of experience and definitely was very energized in terms of being able to hear from him and what he was able to offer us, even as we kind of tentatively walk through this. So without further ado, Mr. Moran, you were up, sir, and definitely looking forward to hearing from you on this morning. Go ahead, man of God.
Well, Robert, first and foremost, as everybody knows on the panel, I'm super excited about spending some time with not just the panelists, but obviously Zion Baptist Church this morning, as well as other folks in the community. I'm also really excited. My mother is actually watching us. So she's texted me like, yeah, turn your blinds down a little bit, it's too much glare. So that's a blessing in itself, to just to say that my mom is tuning in and my dad's tuning in and my son's tuning in. But more importantly, I'm glad the community is tuning in, because I think this topic is one of the most important topics that we need to be discussing as families, as churches, and as communities, about the journey of making sure that we are really building the generational wealth that is necessary for our families to continue our legacies, as well as continue the ability to take care of themselves if we were to obviously pass on. But before we get started, just to kind of formally introduce myself, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Wayman Lynch Insurance Agency. I know a lot of you may know that name in the DC metropolitan community, but the Wayman Lynch Insurance Agency has been around since 1977. We started right here in Riverdale. We have 2 locations, one in Hyattsville, as well as one over in Columbia Heights. So we take a lot of pride into this discussion about life and financial products, but more specifically around life insurance, and just making sure that our clients are properly protected, not just now, but in the future. So just to kind of get the conversation started off, is that we wanted to kind of take everyone down a path of really understanding what life insurance is about, right? Most people think, I need a life insurance policy, so when I pass on, my family is good. Well, there's also a thing called living benefits that life insurance can provide for you and your family. And that's something that is super important for folks to understand. So again, it's not just about taking care of your final arrangements. It's also about life insurance being there for emergencies, for college education, for if you want to take a trip, when that time opens back up, right? So the key component is really understanding what life insurance can do for you and your family, and then kind of moving on from there. One of the things that we've been blessed with as an agency during the pandemic is a lot of our clients have been able to call us, right, when they didn't have the ability to go to work, or they got laid off, or they needed some extra capital to assist with making ends meet. They were able to pull cash out of their life insurance policies to use it to pay for expenses and so forth. So one of the things that we love to focus on is defining what's important for the family. Is it term insurance, or is it whole life, or if it's universal life? And that's something that we do a one-on-one conversation with families to make sure that they are properly insured, but more importantly, properly educated about what their options are. So again, I think it's very important. I know we'll get into some conversation here shortly, but I think it's definitely important for everybody that's on the line. If you have an advisor, if you have an insurance agent, reach out to them, right? And double check to see what's going on. Number one, you want to double check to see how much your benefit will pay out, right? If something was to happen to you. Number two, you want to figure out what type of policy that you have, okay? So when I look at term insurance, right? Term insurance to me is comparable to like renting an apartment. At some point, you're gonna have to turn it in, okay? So, and also term insurance has a built cash value. And although it's cheap, it's a very cheap option for folks. It's just not the best option, I would personally say, for families if you're looking for long-term generational wealth transfer to your family members. But again, it does have a place. But where you look at whole life and universal life, those 2 products will give you not only the death benefits that you're looking for, but cash buildup. So for example, Mr. Lynch, he used life insurance to send both of his daughters to college. Okay. So again, those are the living benefits that using universal life and whole life insurance will provide. So again, I know we'll get to a lot of conversation today, but I wanted to kick off and just let everybody know how excited I am to be on this panel, to have this real conversation. And I'm here to assist. I'm here as a consultant to assist any family that has questions or needs and so forth. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, definitely, Mr. Moran. Is there anything you want to share right now in terms of some of the other things that we may be able to do to kind of think about some of the financial things as you talk about as we live, as we age, and as we kind of move forward into senior life, or maybe even accidents that may happen and needs that may emerge, and as we move towards the end of life?
Yeah, I think the key thing is, number one, I want to dispel the misconception that folks can't get life insurance based on age, right? Based on maybe past health issues or concerns. The example I would give, I have a client right now, she had breast cancer 10 years ago. And she did all her treatments and the whole ball of wax. And we were able to get her the best coverages that Nationwide could provide. And so there's this misconception that, I had a illness before, I can't get life insurance. No, you can get life insurance, right? You just got to get involved with the right folks that can do the right research and have the right options and different companies that you can shop around with. So that's number one, that folks can get life insurance. But as we are getting, up in, I guess, in age, if you will, I think it's very, very important to also analyze, which we'll talk about too, is long-term care benefits as well. And one of the great things about life insurance is that you can actually add on your long-term care benefits as a rider to your life insurance policy. So that definitely gives you some options as well. But again, I ask anybody that does have a life insurance policy, pull that life insurance policy out, double check the limits, double check your beneficiaries, okay? So I know some folks maybe gotten divorced or moved on or whatever. And I'm just gonna give you a heads up. If you got somebody else on that form and you don't like that person anymore, we can't do nothing about it. That money is gonna go to that beneficiary. So I would just advise everyone that's listening out there, if you got a life insurance policy, great. But it's always also very important to pull it out or even get a second opinion from somebody so they can double check to see what you got. We at our agency, we are MDRT agency, which is a life and financial designation, which stands for $1 Million Roundtable. So essentially what that means is that we perform at a pretty high level. And I would tell you, one of the greatest things that we do is analyze your current life policy, if it's with another firm, just to say, hey, you're doing great, keep it, or B, we need to have a conversation and maybe look at some different options. So we're just here to help at the end of the day, because one of the things that we're trying to do in the next 4 years is provide $1 billion, that's with a B, $1 billion of coverage to our community. So once I hit that number, I'm gonna kind of take a step back because I've done what I had to do for my community, right? Which is, I know that will be $1 billion transferred from insurance companies into my community. So that's my focus right now, and that's where we're at. But so the two major things: pull your policy out, call your agent, or get a second opinion right now, just to make sure your policy is going down the right path. Because I do see a lot of policies where people think they got one thing, and then once they get to the Jenkins funeral home, they ain't got nothing. Okay, so we want to make sure we got everything lined up properly.
Well, I thank you for that, and definitely even some folks that I know that are doing and dealing with insurance, such as yourself, are definitely chiming in and loving where you're talking about. And as I said, this will be an ongoing discussion, folks, and I definitely want to thank everyone that is joining us also on our Facebook page as well. Definitely have already gotten kind of dinged there. I've gotten text messages. I've gotten everyone blowing me up. Where can we find stuff? So please, especially if you're on Facebook or if you have friends, call them up in the midst of all that is going on, and please be able to share with this on today. So we definitely want you to be able to do that. So I do thank you for that, the cursory information there, Mr. Moran.
Yeah.
And with that is he's going to still be with us. And we're going to even have a time that if we need to, we'll have some breakout rooms if people need to address certain issues that are going on. But again, in terms of this, I want to be able to kind of pull up. It's time for another poll. It is time for another poll. And I should have asked this at the beginning before he started, but let's just find out right now. And I'll give you all about a minute to answer this poll right here. And panelists, forgive me, I forgot to share this one with you all. So definitely, if you are on, you can go ahead on and answer. I see we got one in. A few coming in now. Give you all another few seconds there to kind of answer these. I see the answers are still coming in, so let me give you about another 30 seconds to answer these, and then we'll go ahead on and share the results. Another 10 seconds, and then I'll share the results of this poll here. So give Mr. Moran some ways to work with. And I'm sorry again for everyone on Facebook that's not able to participate in the polls and other people that may be joining us and dialing in, but we do want to use this information at least to be able to share. And just to kind of look at there, to look at that, we have some interesting results. One of the questions I asked in terms of life insurance is, do you have life insurance and do you know your coverage? Some people say that they have it just for themselves. A few others that have them for themselves, just for themselves and no one else. We have one person that has it on someone else and not themselves. And quite a few that have them on their self and their loved ones.
I also want to mention, real quick, guys, is that, listen, the biggest misconception is I got life insurance, but it's through my job. Always own your own life insurance. I'm so excited the attorneys over here shaking their head yes, right? Always own your own life insurance, okay? There's a limited amount of companies that actually will transfer that life insurance over to you in retirement or if you leave your job, okay? So case in point, my mother-in-law lives in Indiana. She retired from the school system. She had life insurance through her job. She went to go retire, and guess what happened? The life insurance ended. She had to go buy a new policy when she was almost 69 years old. You're talking about rates of $400 or $500 a month, and we literally had to tell her, like, don't worry about it. Like, well, there's no need. I'd rather you spend that money and coming to see us here in Maryland. Okay. So my point is that do not rely on your job's life insurance. You have to have your own, you have to own your own stuff. So that's something also that we can discuss one-on-one or in the breakout sessions or whatever.
Sure. And then the other things that I have there are some people that do have long-term care insurance, but there are a lot of people that do not have it right now. And do you have a plan to be able to draw it down from funds of retirement or beforehand as needed? and wanted to be able to share that with folks that they're able to see. And Mr. Moran, while I have you real quick before we segue over to our attorney, Ms. Griffin there, I want to be able to get one question there from Reverend McAlpine. Reverend McAlpine, go ahead and unmute yourself. You can go ahead and get your question in.
I'm sorry, Rob, I don't have a question. I don't know, I must have hit the wrong button, but I'm enjoying things so far.
All right, you had a testimony, then that's all right then. I'm glad that the Lord used you for a testimony and a wave offering there. It's so good when I serve with great staff at Zion Baptist. So I do thank God for Reverend McAlpine, who's also another chaplain who is actually joining us.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I hit the mute button by accident there. And the next thing that I do have in terms of being able to look at our conversation, I do have yet again, another poll for those that are joining us on Zoom, and give you all about 2 minutes to answer that. All right, another 30 seconds there just to be able to share these here. Some other things to kind of prime the pump on today. Another 10 seconds. This will be a good place for us to be able to segue in as I get ready to share these results here with everyone and get ready to deal with some of these things on legal matters. First question was, how prepared are you? It should have been you or your loved ones to decide on legal matters. 40% feel that they are prepared. 52% feel that they're not prepared. Asking if you have a will, we have 43% of our people that say that they have a will, 57% that do not. Third question was, have you discussed who will handle decisions for you if you should become incapacitated? 67% have had that conversation, 33% have not. And the last question was, have you had a discussion with someone over your medical decisions? 57% have said that they have had that question that they have answered, and we have had 43% that have not. With that, I guess that will lead us into our next segment here of being able to deal with our legal affairs. And I'm so happy to be able to present to you all at this time Attorney Amy D. Griffin, who will go over some legal matters with us in terms of being able to think about legacy and legal issues that can come up as we age and progressing towards our final breath in life. Attorney Griffin, over to you, ma'am.
Good morning. Thank you so much for allowing us, to the Griffin firm, to participate in this. This presentation is indeed necessary conversations, and I'm honored to be able to follow up my brother Montreal, because it is truly the conversations that we have all of the time with our crew, reinforcing those statements. So I thank you for that. One of the things that I like to share, one of the principles of our firm, we start with, write the vision and make it plain upon tablets that he may run that reads it. And I think that one of the reasons why it's really important is write it, write it, write it, write it, write it. Saying it, thinking it, knowing it, believing it doesn't make it so, doesn't make it enforceable. But what I also like is that he may run that reads it. So that means beyond you, that the vision is not just for you, it's for the people who come after you. The vision should be bigger than you, than your lifetime. Everyone to whom much is given, much is required. Do what you've been blessed with. You've been blessed with for a reason. So we should not waste it. We know that a good man leaves inheritance for his children's children. Not just our children's children. And by default, if it's not written, if it's not going to get to your children's children. Right? And let everything be done in decency and good order. When I always hear people, saying that they have your house in order. Having your estate plan done is putting things decently in order. Not having it is like creating a scavenger hunt for your family. Next slide, please. Oh, yes, next slide. Now, these are the amazing women of the Griffin firm. I know that is, I like to show it because I know that oftentimes people see presentations and just see like the person who's presenting and know that it is so much greater than I. And I always try to reinforce the fact that if something were to happen to me tomorrow, I do want the whole wide world to stop and mourn for those moments, but know that we have a team. We have a team approach. So missing me is, yes, I want to be devastating, but know that the work goes on. And I want each and every one of us to be thinking in that same way. That is an emotional distress, but if we have our stuff straight, it will continue to move on beyond us. Our core values are faith, service, excellence, and relationships. So what we know is we need to move on together. Next one. Estate planning answers 3 questions, and sometimes I think that we think that the first one is where we stop. What happens when you die? Yes, that is a very important question, and that can solve the immediacy answer. And then the next question is, what happens if you're unable to care for yourself? We need to be planning for our disability. As opposed to, I've had people say it doesn't matter what happens when I die because I'm dead. But if you are incapacitated, you really care who's going to step up to volunteer to do work on your behalf, to care for you on your behalf, because that is a situation that sometimes the first person who volunteers isn't the person we want there. And then thirdly, which I think is the most empowering statement, the most empowering question, and why we are here today is about what's the legacy that you want to leave. The legacy is about our children's children. So I know that someone else is going to talk about the healthcare decision-making beyond you. But I also want to talk about, in our incapacity, talking about a durable power of attorney. Somebody should have capacity to manage your finances if you are not able to do it on your own. Of course, you want to select somebody because, again, you don't want necessarily want the first person who volunteers to say, oh, I'll take care of her money because she's not able to. You want to have somebody that you've identified who will manage your assets in a way that are in your best interest. What we see on TV, no, we're not ready yet. What we see on TV yet for is a reading of the will for the last will and testament. These people go into a lawyer's office for a reading of the will. That's just a TV thing. In real life, there is people call me and say, I want to do a reading of the will, and I want to say, I'll read it for you, but it has no power. The last will and testament directs what is the probate process, and that is a court proceeding. It's a lawsuit. And so it's a lawsuit that a person has to initiate so that the assets of the person who passed away can be distributed. And the district, it isn't really incredibly onerous, the probate process, but it starts off with the first thing the court does after someone petitions, meaning asks the court for the permission to distribute the assets. The first thing they do is they make sure that you are either able by qualification, and that means being appointed by the will. If there wasn't a will, there's a law called the law of intestacy, which means these are the rules, the formulas that will distribute the assets. And so you file a petition with the court. the judge has to sign the order, and then a legal notice needs to be put in the paper. And in DC, it's 2 newspapers for 3 consecutive weeks saying, and if Amy owed you any money, come forward now during this time frame. In Maryland, it's much more onerous and much more burdensome. That's because there is an inheritance tax in Maryland. So they want to make sure they know every asset that the decedent had so that they can get taxes when necessary. So you need to be really thoughtful about how to make that happen. But again, even all of the districts have the legal notice that's required to go in the newspaper. And assets should not be distributed until the creditors have had a chance to come forward and to make a claim, and their claims are satisfied. So that's when distributions can be made. So those folks who are standing there waiting with their hands out, they got to wait a little while. They got to wait a few months to make sure that those assets are distributed. Now you can go ahead to the next slide. Unfortunately, for those people who do not create a will, again, the formula is applied. The formula doesn't always fit. Now, I love being a Black person in America, but we just don't always use the law. You went too fast. We don't always use the law for the, we don't take the benefits of the law or the imply. Well, we will get divorced without getting divorced. Without the benefit law, we just leave. We adopt a child without adopting a child. We just say, come on, and you one of mine now. Right? And so, and we get married without getting married. I have a brother who, my parents, neither of my parents were his parents, and he's just my brother. So that's just what we do. And I love the sense of community, but I gotta tell you, the law does not recognize it. Most of us have blended families. And this is a picture of my father's family. And my grandmother married Mr. Wilcox, and they had 4 amazing children. Mr. Wilcox passed away, and then she married Grandpa Griffin, had 12 more, 12 more children for that total of 16. Grandma Griffin, predeceased Grandpa Griffin, of course, she didn't have a will and everything went to Grandpa Griffin. When Grandpa Griffin passed away, all of his biological children were able to receive. Now, he didn't intend to disinherit the other kids. However, that's what happened. And there was a rift that was created as a result thereof. We have so many blended families. I've been married now for a whole year, and we're a blended family. And so we need to make sure that we make those changes, like making sure those exes still are the beneficiaries, making sure that each of our children are recognized and supported and appreciated. We need to make sure that happens. And so what we know is we need to make sure that our documents represent what we want, and we're not reliant on the formula. Because even if we just have that one kid, we may have that one kid that does not know how to act. Look at the next slide. Because as we know, you can have a bunch of kids and you love them the same, but they're not the same. If we have a child who has special needs, and I fervently believe that all kids are special needs, right? But they have some who have special needs that the government recognizes, that they get benefits based on their income and or their assets. And if indeed we don't plan for it, they may lose their benefit just because we didn't plan for it. And it doesn't need to be a lot of money. If your child who's on, or a loved one who's on disability receives $3,000, they get knocked off, right? So we need to be planning for how that works. And we need to be thinking about the eccentricities of our children. They are, we've had wonderful, I have 2 amazing children, but they are very, very, very different. And one of the things I will say to you that they are both married, happily married, but if perchance one of my children don't stay happily married, I don't really want to sow into the life of their former. So I want to make sure that my assets stay in my bloodline for my children's children. Not that I wish anybody anything negatively, but I'm planning for my children's children. So we need to be thinking about how do we plan for that, right? So often we see people add their kids' names to their house deeds. And I say, please don't, please don't, please don't. It's very, very rare that I want someone to do that. And that's typically when we're in Medicaid crisis planning. But typically, one of the things that happens is we put our kids' names on our deed to avoid probate, which it does indeed do. However, if your children are on your deed and something happens, let's say they're in a car accident, that is an asset that can have a creditor attached. So we need to be thoughtful about that. Another thing, a great example that I use because we're in the district, is that capital gains is a huge consideration. And what happens is and I use my former next door neighbors as an example, they bought their house for $50,000 years ago. And now their house is worth $650,000. They have, so if they were to sell the house, there would be capital gains on the difference between what they bought their house for and what they sold it for, which is $600,000, right? And that's significant taxation. If they add their child's name to their deed, it's as if their kid bought it for $50,000 as well. But if they transferred it later in life through a transfer on death deed, through the will, or through a revocable trust, it's as if the kid bought it for the $650,000 or whatever the fair market value was at the time of transfer, which is a significant financial benefit. So I encourage people to be thoughtful about how do we plan for that. Okay, we can go to the next. One of the reasons why I really love this presentation is because in the multitude of advisors, there is safety. We each need a personal board of directors. We need to have a financial advisor. We need to have a realtor. We need to have, of course, an attorney. We need to be thoughtful about bringing folks together to make sure that you make the decisions that are in your best interest. The Griffin Firm, we are an amazing group of women who can support you to protect and transfer assets, but we're not about the creation piece. One of the things that we work closely with insurance and financial advisors, and how do we make sure that there is not just that insurance policy, but an insurance policy that is put to good use. Next slide. So one of the things that we use to transfer assets and to avoid probate, which is really significant, is use of trust. And there are, a lot of times people think, oh no, I don't need trust. I was speaking with folks yesterday. We don't need a trust. But if you want to direct your assets, if you want to protect your assets, we need to be thinking about the use of a trust. Don't let someone think that what is for you is not for you, right? Trusts are great for during your lifetime as well. Next slide. There are two major categories: revocable trust and irrevocable trust, or revocable and irrevocable. A revocable trust is about legacy building. One of the things that we use all the time is we have someone, we put our houses in trust. For example, I have a house, my house is in a revocable trust. When I pass away, I have 2 children. When I pass away, I don't want the house split up. We know that property is a foundational wealth building tool. Right? Real property is a foundational wealth building tool. I have 2 kids. The only other way to give it to 2 people is to sell the property. But if the house stays in trust, and after I've passed away, the income, it can become an income producing property, and assets or distributions can be made annually after the income is created and maintenance is maintained. So we need to be thinking about that. And a revocable trust is an extension of you. It avoids the probate process, so we don't go through the creditors period and then there is no frozen asset, but it also has rules. And so what I love about a revocable trust is that it's a rule book for the assets. For me, it's for my grandchildren can go to college based on the life insurance policies that my trust will buy for each grandchild. They can borrow it to go to college. They can borrow against it to go to buy a house. But then when they pass away, the returns will go, the benefits, the leftover benefits will go back into the trust. That's multi-generational wealth building. The irrevocable trust is a lot like an LLC. It's an asset protection trust. It's not, doesn't use your social security number like our revocable trust does. It has its own EIN. And we use that for tax planning and for Medicaid planning. Because we know we've all heard stories about how the state comes and takes your house after the nursing home. But we can avoid that if we plan for it. Next slide, please. And then the final consideration is, if you have a business, please plan for that transition as well. And we at the Griffin Firm refer to the 5 Ds of business succession planning. In case of disability, divorce, departure, we know that some folks don't want to die in their business. They want to leave and retire. How does that look? And dissolution, what does it look like to dissolve your business? And we will all pass away one day. And if we're running the business while that happens, is there somebody who can take over? Is our children, are our children in position to take over, even to inherit a portion of the business and let it run on its own? So there are those things that we need to plan for, but we need to plan. Next slide. So we are so much more than our stuff. I encourage people all of the time to incentivize our values. Don't just give $1 million, $2 million, or even $100,000 without expectation, right? Because I've seen people, unfortunately, people only call me not to say I've had the best day ever, but typically to say this has been a huge problem. So I encourage people to put the rules, put your values, encourage your folks to have instructions with it. Because we know that our people perish for the lack of knowledge. We know that lottery winners are more often file bankruptcy than typical people because they get a huge infusion of cash without instructions. So thank you. I know we'll have questions later, correct?
Some sliding over. Yes, we will have some questions later on, and if people have them now, definitely we'll be able to entertain them as well. So definitely thank you, Attorney Griffin, for sharing what you had there. Mr. Moran, I have to come back. I did have one question for you that I overlooked, and definitely knows people are splitting up their Saturdays. Wanted to catch this. One question that came in was, isn't long-term care insurance, isn't it expensive and almost prohibitive to be able to get? So I didn't know if you wanted to be able to address that.
Yeah, what a fantastic question. So it all depends. First of all, every customer and every client is different, and they have their own unique scenarios and situations. So there's 2 different long-term care options that you usually have. The least expensive route is actually putting it on as a rider on your life insurance policy. So essentially what that means is that they'll take a percentage of your base amount. So if hypothetically, let's say you have a $500,000 policy, they'll say, okay, we'll take off of there 4% of the face amount per month. So that policy will pay out $20,000 a month for long-term care. So you can do that. That's a great option. Is the least expensive route. Now, we do have clients in the agency that actually have a long-term care policy on its own, okay? Those become a little pricey. Those can run you about a BMW all the way up to almost a Bentley, okay? So, yeah, those range between about $85,000 to probably, $150,000, depending on, how much coverage you want per day. So again, every customer is unique. Every customer has different unique needs, but one of the great things about that second policy I told you is if you never use the capital, the company returns it all back to you. And you can cancel at any time if you drop in $85,000, and we give you all your money back plus the interest. So there's some different options out there. Again, the ideal target age to start having these conversations are around 50 to 55. You got to start locking in your long-term care, because you go past that, it can become very expensive, I would say.
Definitely. Thank you for answering that. Truly, thank you for answering that. And as we get ready to segue again, you all that are joining us on the Zoom platform, at least, and thank you everyone is also joining us on Facebook Live. And to answer the question, yes, this is recorded, so some of you all can go back and it is online, so you all can kind of go back. And then some of this is just meant to kind of prime the pump. You will probably need to get with someone that deals with money and money management. You will need to be able to get with someone that deals with law, and want to be able to kind of prime the pump as we get ready to segue again and look at the next piece of a survey that I have again. And want you all to be able to answer these questions for me there. Give you a minute or so to be able to answer those. And for those that are joining us across other mediums, I will read the questions to you when folks are done so you can know what they are answering. Give you about another 30 seconds to answer. Another about 10 seconds or so. Another 5 seconds. Okay, so the next set of questions dealt with palliative care and hospice. First question was, have you heard of palliative care and hospice care, and do you know the difference? 84% said that they have heard of it. 16% said that they have not. Do you have an aversion to palliative care? We had 26% that said yes, they do. 74% that said that they do not. Do you view hospice as giving up? We had 5% that said that they do. 95% view hospice as not giving up. And have you or a loved one had an experience with hospice or palliative care? 79% have said that they did. 21% have shared that they did not. And just sharing that with our viewers that are on Zoom, and wanted you all to be able to kind of audibly hear, and just wanted to be able to share those thoughts and opinions with you on today. And the reason that I ask those is because I'm very lucky to be able to have Reverend Dr. Carrie E. Johnson with us up next, who is a chaplain who deals with palliative care as well as hospice. Chaplain Johnson, Reverend Dr. Carrie Johnson, brings 20 years plus of experience in palliative and hospice care. In addition to that, his doctoral dissertation work dealt with resistance of African Americans in dealing with hospice and palliative care. So I could think of no better expert to be able to deal with this subject matter and to be able to discuss this with us on today. And as I'm waiting for him to kind of unmute and start his camera there, we're definitely glad to be able to have him with us. I do see him in the panelist side there at least now. So, and wanting to hear from him on today to be able to discuss some of this subject matter with us on today. So as I always affectionately call this gentleman, the Bishop, and definitely trying to stretch that time out there as he is coming on. Definitely hoping he will jump up here in a second so that he can be able to give us some subject matter expertise there as well. And I do want to thank you all, and thank you all for the questions that you all are also putting in on Facebook and in the chat as well. Definitely thank you all for being able to share with us on this afternoon. And I'm hoping that Carrie is not having an issue there. Reverend Dr. Johnson, I'm hoping is not having an issue. We'll try this other one that's there as well. I do have two names for him, so I will bring the other one over. There we go. Okay,
Right.
there, Bishop of Loudoun County. There you go, Bishop. Start the camera for us as well, sir. Definitely, people would love to see you on this afternoon, Doc.
Thank you, my colleague, Reverend Tolson. Thank you for the privilege to be a part of this panel. I've been touched by the previous presenters. I've been a hospice chaplain for 20 years. Had the experience of meeting several families, all ages, ethnic groups. What I'm particularly concerned was for the African-American family and how miseducation is out there about hospice care and palliative care. And just wanted to bridge a gap between African-American community, African-American church, and hospice care and palliative care, and see how we can be a benefit to the local church and community. That's a couple of things. I was thinking about a personal story, which I had with a local pastor, African-American pastor, and his wife was caring for her mother in the home. And we just had a casual conversation, and I brought up hospice care. And he didn't know all the specifics of what hospice care was all about. I told him, let's go and try and seek out information and a nurse to come in and let's observe his mother-in-law. So he called up hospice. She came in and she was admitted to hospice. And she died about maybe a month after. But what if he would have known about hospice earlier and taken advantage of the services that we provide? I think it would have been a benefit not only for his mother-in-law, but also for his family. So I just wanted to talk about palliative care versus hospice care, end-of-life care. Palliative care, as you see on the screen, is a medical specialty that focuses on providing patients relief from the symptoms and stress of serious illness. The goal is to improve quality of life for both the patient and the family, versus not hospice. Hospice is for comfort care and to make sure that the patient is comfortable. There's no cure in hospice care. Many Americans, particularly people of color, still aren't clear on what palliative care really is or how it can benefit them. Here are 4 things you may know about palliative care and how it can help patients and families live with a serious illness. First of all, palliative care is available at any age and at any stage of your illness. Palliative care provides an extra layer of support for people living with a serious illness, and it can be brought in from the point of diagnosis. In fact, the earlier palliative care is brought in, the better. It's not dependent on the prognosis. So unlike hospice care, palliative care can be provided along with curative treatment. Receiving palliative care simply means that you want an extra layer of support to help improve your quality of life. Palliative care is about living with a serious illness. Palliative care is available for both children and adults with serious illnesses, regardless of age or the stage of illness. You don't have to be elderly to receive care. You just have to want to live better with your serious illness. Secondly, palliative care can provide support to caregivers as well as seriously ill patients. Dealing with serious illnesses is stressful, not only for the patient, but also for their families. Caregivers often experience loss of work hours, loss of jobs, high stress, and serious declines in physical and mental health. Palliative care doesn't just treat the patient, but it also treats the family. Caregivers who receive palliative care have an improved quality of life and lower levels of depression and feeling of being overwhelmed. So it's an extra support for the patients and the family. Palliative care is available to children with serious illness and their families. Children with serious illnesses face a unique set of challenges. Pediatric palliative care, which my colleague, Brother Rob, is kind of specializing in now, is specialized medical care tailored to the needs of seriously ill children and their families. It helps to manage symptoms of the child's disease, and it also helps with communication and coordination of care. With the close of communication that palliative care provides, families are better able to choose options that are in line with their values, traditions, and cultures. This improves the well-being of the entire family. And fourth, you can have palliative care along with curative treatment. Palliative care is appropriate at any stage in the disease progression, and many patients receive palliative care alongside curative treatment. In fact, the curative treatment itself can often bring on symptoms that negatively impact a patient's quality of life. Cancer patients struggle with the symptoms that accompany chemotherapy, and palliative care was provided as a complement to chemotherapy, helping to restore energy and physical strength. Palliative care is about improving the quality of life of both the patient and the family. So this is totally different from hospice care. So then we're going to talk about hospice care. And this, we oftentimes, we specialize in end-of-life care. And I heard Attorney Griffin was saying that we oftentimes, we got to prepare for death because all of us will die. So what is hospice care? What is hospice care? It is a special kind of care that focuses on the quality of life for people and their caregivers who are experiencing an advanced life-limiting disease. And I often say, when there is no cure. Hospice care provides compassionate care for people in the last phases of an incurable disease so that they may live a fully and as comfortable as possible. We oftentimes call this comfort care, making sure the patient is comfortable. Most people receive hospice care through the Medicare hospice benefit. Medicaid and Veterans Health Administration follow the Medicare benefit model. And I listed some services that hospice care provides, depending on which hospice it is. I found out in Florida, they have more benefits than they do on this side of the country, on the East Coast. But physician services, nursing services, medical equipment such as hospital beds, wheelchairs and walkers, drugs to control the pain and other symptoms, and I often say this, related to the diagnosis, nursing aides, social worker services, chaplain services that provides emotional and spiritual support for the patient and the family with grief and loss, bereavement services. Some provide physical therapy, short-term inpatient care in the hospital, including respite care, which is a service designed to provide family members a short break from caring for their loved one at home. So when the patient may have symptoms that may be out of control, they can't control it at home, there may be a short time for respite care. And then the goal is to try to get them comfortable and bring them back home. And also volunteer services, having volunteer service to help help with the patient and family needs. Two things to keep in mind, and I'll close this out. First of all, the services provided depends upon what the patient and family needs. Is need-based. Which services a patient receives and how often services are received are based on the needs of each patient and family. What are the patient and family's needs with this diagnosis that's going to end their life? The services that are provided can be adjusted as the situation of the patient and family change over time. When patients decide to receive hospice care, the hospice team collaborates with them about what their personalized care involves. What would you like? How would you like to die? What are some of the things you need to, as we say, and this is the name of this seminar, getting your affairs in order. So this is something that all of us need to consider, as you may have family members, loved ones who are aging and may have a diagnosis that's going to end their life. And finally, some hospices provide additional services beyond those covered by the Medicare hospice benefit or other insurance. Examples are special types of chemotherapy and radiation that do not cure a disease, but keeps them comfortable, but help ease the symptoms. If there is a service that you think you or your family member need, ask your hospice nurse or doctor about getting it. So again, it's need-based. Then now I covered what is the difference between palliative and hospice care. So again, we need to take that into consideration as we look at end of life care. What would I like my loved one, or if by chance that something may happen to someone in your family or whatever, how would you like that to happen? What would you like the care to look like for your family in need towards the end of life? And these can be hard questions to ask, but they must be asked. Again, there's a good book to look at, Hard Choices. We're going to have to make some hard choices because there may become a time when the patient become non-coherent and you don't know what they would like. But when they're coherent, ask the hard questions. It will be better off for you. And hospice care and palliative care is an option. And I would encourage you to take advantage of it if that's the case for you and your family. All right.
Thank you, my bishop there, as I always call him. That is my brother and my friend there, the Bishop of Loudoun County, as I always tell him. One thing for sure for folks in the DMV area to know, Pastor Johnson has been serving in Loudoun County area, and really before the territories got broken down into smaller regions, he was doing this, as I said, and has been with the same company for over 20 years. So we jokingly say is the only chocolate chip in a sugar cookie, and to see what he is able to do and the integration that he has in that community. And especially in this heightened time where race can sometimes be a thing, that everyone seems to just welcome him and love him. Definitely glad for what he can bring in terms of his wealth of experience, as well as his research, which really does speak to an African-American community. So again, I thank you there, sir.
Well, Reverend Tolson, let me tell the panel this. Reverend Tolson has been an asset to the entire hospice organization. Everybody loves him. He's doing a wonderful job. And I'm just glad to be a part of what he's doing. And even though I may have 20 years of doing hospice care, when I work with Rob, Pastor Rob, I call him Pastor Rob, he always looks at it another way, and it makes me better. And I'm so glad for the gift that he brings to the entire organization. And he's doing great things. So I'm glad to be a part of this panel. I'm glad he asked me. I called it a humble request to come and do what he told me to do, and I just wanted to follow his lead. Thank you, Reverend Tolson.
Well, I definitely will thank you, and the Cash App will be coming, as I must pay all these people when they're very complimentary. So this is part of the trash talking that we do. If anybody gets a chance to really know me, they know that as part of my ministry as well, as I try to disarm people, at least with laughter. I want to catch one question there from Sister Harris, who says that some of the end-of-life questions and concerns can be answered in a properly executed living will and advance directive. And I will say partially, but I will yield possibly back over to our attorney there, Attorney Griffin, to be able to answer some of that. And I'll give you maybe some bedside experience as well. So Attorney Griffin, let me hear from you, please.
Absolutely. One of the things that I may have neglected to mention is that we have three parts of necessary documents, and the second one being that healthcare packet, which includes the advanced directive living will. But one of the things I think actually, as Montreal mentioned earlier, is those situations and circumstances change, right? And we encourage people to revisit those decisions regularly. Because what I thought I wanted at the age of way back then at 40, it is different at 50. I remember 50, right? And then as I get to 60, 70, 80, believe in God for 90, my answers are going to be different. So, but we also need to be really, really clear. I'll never forget when I had a mom who called me in distress, wanting to sue her son-in-law because of the decisions he wanted to make. We know the story of Terry Schiavo. Right? Because not only is your decision needs to be written out so that you want what your decisions applied, but you also want to make sure that your family is in concert so that there isn't a disagreement that we're fighting amongst ourselves. We know that grief is a huge emotion, and we don't want to devastate our family by allowing them the confusion that would make them operate against each other.
Yes, and I do thank you for that, because I definitely want to say that there is a piece of this that should be, as you mentioned, a very much ongoing conversation. I will say that I expect people that are in their 20s to be more aggressive than somebody that is in their 80s or 90s. And again, I think as you used, and sometimes as well as people mention, that the things that TV do, I think a lot of the times do a disservice to all of our crafts and our callings that we do have. So part of that, I will say as well, from experience that I've had bedside, sometimes people are surprised that they are named in advance directives and no conversations have been had. So they've trusted someone to make decisions, but people that will say, I'm not comfortable making this decision because we've never discussed it. So sometimes, again, and I'm glad, as I had a little bit of a peek sheet for our panelists and being able to see the presentations on today, that I know that our next panelists will be able to kind of speak about a little bit more, because my God, we show out in the funeral home. So yeah. If you want to be a Pence fly and you want to land somewhere, please, by all means, land in the Black funeral home. And the turn up is real. So as LaVonna is twisting in her chair and laughing, because I can only imagine what she has seen. And my God, if we can all get pseudo pen names, the stories that we can tell, Black comedy Tyler Perry will have nothing, I'm sure, on what is able to be experienced by us as we start to deal with that. And then where we going to lay mama and what we going to bury her in and everything else like that, and all of these type of things. So with that, folks, again, time for another poll, this time dealing with the funeral home. Give you all about a minute or minute and a half to fill this out. You have a couple of questions up there, and I will share the questions and results with folks that are calling in, as well as with our Facebook audience. So you all have the poll in front of you. Let's give about another 15 seconds on that. Okay, I'm going to end these and share these results with everyone there. First question was, do you have an idea of how you want your remains cared for and by whom? 69% of the people said yes, they do. 31% said no, that they do not. Do you want to be buried or cremated? 56% of the people said I want to be buried. 25% of the people said that I want to be cremated. We have no one that said that they wanted to be buried but haven't told anyone. We have 6% of the people that said that they want to be cremated, but they've told no one about those wishes. 13% of the people said I really haven't given it much thought and will leave it up to my loved ones. Question number 3 was, have you done any pre-planning and have a pre-needs policy that you are paying on? 31% said yes, 69% say no. And the next question, the last one was, do you have a funeral budget in mind? 69% said yes, 31% said no. So with that, I'm so happy to be able to present at this time Miss LaVonna Jenkins Reed, who is a part of the Johnson and Jenkins Funeral Home, where she started off and developed her training and such, and has since now been called into a new season of life where she has started Good Morning Life by Jay Reed. And I'm so glad to be able to see her walk in her calling and being able to offer services. And if you all have seen the newspaper, probably about 2.5 months, I want to say, or maybe 3 months ago, she was a part of a funeral procession that went down to Black Lives Matter Plaza and definitely led a beautiful procession there and a beautifully wrapped casket as well. So the innovation that she is bringing to funeral services and the expertise that she has is definitely going to be something that will bless us on today. So without further ado, present to some definitely welcome and may be familiar to others, Miss LaVonna Jenkins Reed.
That was actually a wonderful introduction. So I'm going to be kind about this. So my name LaVonna was actually, it's actually French. I actually got it from a French white girl, my mother said, when she was working at the ER. So you spelled it correctly for the French white girl, but because my mother is African-American, just to clarify, it's Lavana. We have that magic and that creativity, just FYI. So if you look for me, it's Lavana Jenkins Reed. So, but thank you for that introduction. Today, I just want to have an honest conversation with everybody in this panel and with the attendees. It says in the Bible, to every season, there's a time and a purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. So with that being said, I have a little bit of difficulty with people acting like the time to die is not something to have a conversation about. God prepared us for it. He warned us about it. Even Jesus Christ had to go to the cross and die to have us take on some of these blessings that we got. But I really want us to have a conversation about passing on. The NFDA not too long ago, a few years back, had a campaign that said, have the conversation of a lifetime. So I want us to have a conversation of a lifetime. I want us to talk about how we can have this conversation today. And let's start with the average cost of a funeral right now in this area is $9,200. So with that being said, that's just the funeral. We haven't even added the aspects of burial yet. So with that in mind, if everybody wants to get to glory, we all have to realize we have to die. And if we have to die, why aren't we being prepared for this time to transition? I would like to go home to my father. be in a good, warm place. With that in mind, I want to make sure that my family's okay while they're still trying to get their way or make their way to glory. Pre-arrangement and pre-planning is just the advanced planning of one's care, disposition of their body or their family members or loved one's body. There are some benefits to it. One of the benefits is peace of mind. Generally speaking, when it comes to families, it is less controversy, less arguing if you plan your own service. So peace of mind, knowing that it's going to be handled the way you want your body to be handled, how you want to be honored. There is another benefit of locking the price in place. So I know we've talked about insurance. I know we've talked about different ways we can handle our finances, but a benefit is if you come to the funeral home and you do a pre-arrangement or you do a pre-planning service, if you pay it all in full, you get to lock in that price. So if the prices were to go up, that doesn't affect you. Another part of that benefit is the insurance that you get from Montreal or the businesses that you have. That money can go specifically to your heirs. So if you decide that you have a little bit of money left over and you can afford to pre-plan your arrangements with a funeral home, the life insurance policy can just exclusively go to your heirs, your families, to the education fund, to the house that might not be paid off in full, the car. So that's something that you should keep in mind. And also, so important, family harmony. It is absolutely necessary. I think I've heard mention of, just simple things that we don't think about as far as why our families squabble during the service. And it's just the idea that they weren't considered before this time. I think the excellent example was given of the blended family, and it wasn't done maliciously, but that's not the intention that was received at the time when the person passed. So just being mindful that we can combat some of these issues, especially since we know it's coming. This is not a surprise to anybody until we get to walk into glory at that time. Death is a part of life. So if we are aware, I think it's wise for everyone to address this issue and help to keep the family unified. Next slide. Okay, conversation. The first conversation you need to have is with yourself. I think you're going to have to prepare your mind to understand the intention behind having a conversation about death. I think a lot of people have this misconception that if I talk about death, that I'm going to die. Or if I talk about death for my mother, she's going to die. That is not the case, especially if you start early. We've seen people who have been in hospice care survive 20 years after they started their pre-arrangement. So it is not a death sentence. It is wisdom to have a conversation about preparing for yourself and preparing for your loved ones' care of their remains. And it's things like, how do you want to be honored? Do you want a funeral? Do you want cremation? Do you want to go burial at sea? I've done that. Do you want a celebration? Like for my care, I want a celebration of life. I actually want to be buried. And then I want everybody to party. And I'm genuinely moving towards that. I want people to come and celebrate me and talk about good times and have slideshows. I would like food because I love cooking. But I know that for a fact for myself, and that's how I want to be received and handled at that time. How do you want to be received? How do you want to be honored? How does your loved one want to be honored? As far as that, you can also have that conversation with your family. How do they want to be honored? How do they want to be received? What do they want to do? Have you thought about involving your family? Now, this is major. I've seen people have arguments about insignificant things to other people that could have not been an issue at all. A case in point, I remember a family arguing about something as small as like a book or a coat. It was a coat that someone threw out. They didn't think anything of it, but it meant everything to that person, that their mother wore that coat. And that's how they remembered their mother. And they wanted that coat, but somebody didn't even think about that, just tossed it out. And now that was I don't even think it was like a real fur. It was just a coat that reminded them of mom, or maybe smelled like mom. And somebody just threw it out as if it was nothing. Cause for confusion and chaos at a funeral service. But just having those things in mind, considering that my daughter remembers me like this, or I remember mom like that, that's things to think about. And involving your family also helps with the grieving process. We think that grief in this country is something that we shouldn't talk about, but grief has to happen in order for us to be healthy. We've loved someone, we've cherished someone. If we can simplify the process of how we handle the deceased, then we can go into the grief process and start to handle our feelings about losing someone that we've cherished so much about. And I think that's an important process. Part of that process is allowing people to participate in some manner. I had a conversation with a friend, and she wanted to be cremated. And she gave no consideration to what her daughter would like to do in the process. And I was like, well, if she wants to participate, let her participate. At least have a conversation to see what it will take for her to feel comfortable in letting you go. And we keep forgetting that part of the grief process when making these arrangements. But I think that's very, very big to consider. Next slide. This just reminds us, talk about having a conversation with yourself and having a conversation with your family about that. Ways to discuss it is over dinner, at family functions, over the phone, with just everyday normal life. You can ask, Mom, what's your favorite color? Mom, what's your favorite outfit? You can observe somebody's music and what their jam is and their groove is. The memories you have. One of the things I thought about this morning in the car is right now my daughter, who's 4 years old, still loves me to life. Like she just screams every time I walk in the door, and she goes, "Mommy, you're home," and I love it. I love that life and that energy. And I thought about it, and I said, when she turns to a teenager, I might not get that welcome home, but I'm going to do it to her because I want her to know that she was loved by me. And I'm going to go, "Bella, welcome home." I thought about that and I said, oh my goodness, that's part of legacy. That's what I would like people to share at my funeral service. That part of my legacy, to make sure you feel loved on. I think I consider myself a legacy event planner. You are legacy producers. If you have this conversation, this difficult conversation that we all think is so taboo to have, you can focus on producing your legacy. You can focus on what you're instilling into your family. You can focus on what they're going to say about you. A lot of times at funerals, we focus on the date of birth and the date of death, and you always hear, but it was the dash that was important. And that dash that is important is your legacy production. You want to make sure that you're setting up the next generation to correct the mistakes you made, to enforce that they have a better future than you had, that you did some of the foundation and the work for them to succeed in life. With that being said, just FYI, just to help you of where you plan. I know we're in DC, but we're in DMV. So if you go to a funeral home in Maryland, if you do a pre-arrangement, I believe you need 80% of the cost of the pre-arrangement down. So essentially, if you buy $1,000 funeral service, you need $800 to lock in that price, or to have a pre-arrangement contract. Excuse me, you lock in the price when you pay 100%. Have that pre-arrangement contract started, and then you can pay over time. In DC, you're allowed to do a payment plan of some sort. So generally, if you go to a funeral home of your choice, they may have a payment plan, or at our funeral home, you're just allowed to give money until you pay it off in full. Now, that does not lock in your price. That means you're subjected to any price inflation as the time goes on. So you do want to try to minimize that and lock in your price as best as you can. But if not, like I said, I had a gentleman pay on his arrangements for over 20 years, $5 he sent in a month until it was paid off in full. Virginia, you do have to have 100% of your funeral arrangements. So just keep that in mind when you go to different funeral homes, that there are options out there. You don't have to pay 100% if you go to a funeral home in DC. You can pay on it as you go along. And that's another option for those who feel like they can't get insurance, or maybe have to take a smaller policy and still have to figure out how to pay for their funeral services. There's always a way if you have the idea. With that being said, I am done. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate all of you all. And it is an honor to be on this panel with all such knowledgeable people. I appreciate it.
Well, definitely glad to have you on today. As I have had, as I said, it's gone down in the DM. I've had people, well, how old are so-and-so, with some of these people that are on here and everything. And of course, you know, with us being African-American, I guess some of us do not look our age, but also have a wealth of experience. So I'm definitely glad to be able to get some of that as well from everyone, and taking that into consideration. So definitely thank you, LaVonna, for all that you've brought to the table and being able to kind of flesh some of this out. And next thing we have up again, our last really poll of the day is kind of segueing us into our last presenter and a good friend of mine there. And want us to be able to kind of take this poll. I will give you all about a minute or so just to kind of look them over. We have a few questions there just to kind of prime the pump as we get ready to receive Mr. Kenneth Taylor. About another 30 seconds, give folks time to answer this. Another 10 seconds. Okay, and I'm going to get ready in the poll and share the results here with everyone. The first question for our folks that are joining us on line or listening in, first question do you have a burial site? 31% said yes, 69% said no. If not, have you considered how your remains will be disposed of? 77% said yes, 23% said no. The next question was, if you have property, do you know if it can convey from state to state? 8% said yes, 92% said no. Does your property include opening and closing costs already paid for? 15% said yes, 85% said no. And the fifth question was, if you have property, has it included a liner? 8% said yes, 92% said no. So with that, I am definitely glad to be able to present on this afternoon Mr. Kenneth Taylor, who is a part of the Dignity Funeral Home. Definitely a person that has a wealth of information and expertise. He is a part of Maryland National Cemetery, where I will promote for some people that may not know or may not remember. Thank God for a little bit of remembrance and being taken everywhere as a child. But we do, Zion Baptist Church, have the Zion Garden out there that we started back in the 80s under Reverend Veazey. We still have some spaces out there as well. So definitely, as we are a Zion community, quite a few disciples that were able to get on that at that time. And as I've talked with him in terms of reinstituting this relationship that we have there with that property and looking at it, and my Lord, I wish we could pay now what we paid then to be able to secure that property. But this gentleman has a wealth of expertise, and just definitely happy to have him at this time. So Mr. Taylor, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
But thank you very much. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Ken Taylor. I am with Maryland National. I've been here about 5 years. Also want to thank the Zion Baptist Church for putting on this. I have been taking copious notes throughout this. Prior to coming here, I knew nothing about the cemetery business or pre-planning. So this has been an awakening for me and bringing me more closer to what I need to know. But the stuff that I've heard, first of all, I think y'all did an excellent job of bringing all the pieces together. Even though some of them overlap, as an individual, what you will end up doing is finding what works best for you. I think the pre-planning thought is something that I will be touching on, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the cemetery part. But I think as a whole, whether you're 20 or 50 or 70 or 80, all these pieces need to be considered. They're not overwhelming, they're smaller pieces. And I appreciate the other presenters helping me understand how they all tie together and make for less stress as we get closer to our final steps. So I'm just going to kind of touch on some of our issues that we talk about here, but our theme has always been your life, your legacy, plan to make it right. And it falls so much in line with what we've heard before. But one of the things that Reverend Towson talked about was the 40-year relationship that Maryland National has with Zion Baptist Church. Yes, there is a cemetery section within Maryland National that was put together just for the members of Zion Baptist Church. So anyone who currently has spaces here or thought about it, I recommend that you reach back out and talk to us about what you have and go back and look at some of the items. One of the things that came to mind as we talked about burial planning is the conversation. I'm sorry, I got to follow with my script here. So there was a survey done by the University of Washington Medical School, and they talked about some of the most stressful items. Hit the next one, it should come up. They talked about divorce, loss of a job, death of a spouse, marriage. All these things brought in some sort of a stress, but I'm sure you all can recognize, the next slide, that the number one and number two stress factors were the death of a spouse, divorce, and death of a family member. That's important as we look at one of the reasons that I am so compassionate about talking to families and trying to get them to understand the process of the cemetery and the funeral process is that stress is there, but you have an opportunity to control that or bring it down for your family members. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Once you understand that those are some of the stress factors, one of the questions you're going to ask yourself is, what now? How do I handle that? Some people know that who you need to call, what you need to do. Some of those things, what you're going to do is you will find that talking to either your pastor or the funeral home, and definitely calling the cemetery, they will guide you through those things at the time of need. But you, as the person that's planning for yourself, what you can do is help your family understand what is going to happen and what your wishes are. As a family services counselor, we help the family before, during, and after the need came about. So keep in mind that the earlier you can decide on what we call the difficult conversation, which has been a theme I've seen run through here, having that conversation and then starting to work towards putting a plan together. Next slide. One of the things that I found most intriguing is we plan for important life events, weddings, college education. We insure ourselves against things that happen. Doesn't it even make sense for us to plan for the inevitable? I think Ms. Jenkins has recently said that we know it's coming. It's told to us that we are going to die. It is inevitable that it's going to happen. We need to plan for those things. We heard from the financial planners and the people who deal with insurance of different ways you can do that. When you come to the cemetery, one of the things you're going to be looking for is if the family has pre-planned, you can almost tell it. There's a sense of calmness. They know that they've had the conversation with the family. They know that those steps that are necessary are put in place. It's not going to totally reduce the amount of pain. The sorrow will still be there. But that short period of time where we are sitting in front of the family services counselor at the cemetery and making those plans, we know that the next steps are going to be easier for us and the family. And I stress a lot on that pre-planning. Go to the next one. Planning can protect you, and you've heard this before, especially at the cemetery. You can save money and price protect. You have a way to have those important decisions that have brought those stress reduced. And you know what's going to happen next. You have a very good understanding of that, because whether it's the parent who's passing and they're leaving the legacy for their children, or if it's a parent who unfortunately may have lost a child, they know that some of those steps are taken care of, and it kind of reduces some of the stress and problems that will come up. And obviously, the rising cost of funeral arrangements. I'll tell you a personal story. I got here 5 years ago, and as I mentioned, I didn't understand about the pre-planning, even though I helped my mother bury about 6 of her brothers and sisters. We did it the old way. Someone passed, everybody put the money together, and we moved on and waited for the next one. This pre-planning thing was very revolutionary to me. But what it does is it's allowing you to protect the rising costs of funeral and cemetery services. We all know what housing costs do. We all know what automobiles. I joke a lot of times that I wish I could pay for a brand new car 10, 15 years ago and then come pick it up today and just drive away without any additional costs. That's what pre-planning does, and it definitely is a value to all. Okay, next one, next slide. This is a very complicated, simple but complicated slide, but I think it makes sense to it. You got to take charge, and you have to plan to make it right. And we look at 4 steps. Now, this says reflect, record, support, and share. But if you look at it, it's really what we talked about all today. You need to be discussing with your family, starting off with understanding exactly what it is you want to do for yourself first, but you have to have that discussion. That's the reflect. The next one is record. We talk about that. What do you want to do? And I think someone says, write it down, write it down, write it down. So that is so important because you got to have a record. One thing I'm going to throw out right here is we have a personal planning guide that anybody's interested, call the cemetery. We can get that to you. It kind of helps bring some of these items together. Sure, there's other vehicles to do that, but we would offer that as well. And then the next one is support. That is where, how are you going to financially support those? Some people say, well, I'll just wait till, I have great insurance and I'll wait till I pass and we'll use the insurance. That might be one strategy, but think about what happens is you need to understand insurance has a value where it's really designed for your family. If you're able to save the cost of that by pre-planning, then what you're able to do is give more of that money to the family. So that's where the support comes in. And by having a plan and having it written down, it ensures that as that time approaches or it happens, you're in a better position, or your family's in a better position to handle that. And obviously the last one is share. I don't know how many times I've sat in front of families and, you ask the question, well, do you know what mom or dad wanted? And saying no. We hadn't had the conversation and we didn't share what we have done. One of the things we're doing with Zion is we're trying to find family members who may have purchased property here who have not used it. If you didn't share it with your family, if they don't know what it is you want, something you've done valuable, like pre-planning, may not provide you the results. So again, all these things come together in how you're going to prepare for the inevitable, how you're going to protect your family, and how you're going to move on from there. Okay, I think it's the last slide I'm going to do on this one. Oh no, go ahead. Drew, if you could just go right to burial benefits. I think it's the next two. Go ahead. One more, I think. I apologize for all the extra slides in there. Right to the burial benefits.
I think that was the last one that we had there.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It must not be on there. Okay, go back to the previous one, and I apologize. I thought I had it. One of the last things I wanted to kind of share with you is there are special considerations for veterans. There are ways that the family can pre-plan for what they want to do. One of the things I would encourage, whether you have it with a dignity provider or any cemetery, you want to reach out to them, find out what you have, find out what you need to do to reach the final conclusion of having a complete package. And we do help families with that as well. That's pretty much kind of summarizes what I wanted to kind of touch on. My name is Ken Taylor. I am at Maryland National, who has been in this community for over 50 years. I'm sorry, 85 years here at Maryland National, but with working with Zion Church, Baptist Church for about 40 years. So I do encourage everybody to call in if you wanted to talk with us about pre-planning. Thank you.
Well, definitely we give everybody a round of applause for sure. Thank you all so much for participating. At this time, I definitely want to open it up for those that may have questions. Again, for those that have called in today, you can use the *9 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute when you're called upon if you're a call-in person. Otherwise, for those that are joining us in the Zoom platform, if you would like to just put your questions, you can either use the Q&A or the chat feature in there, as well as you can raise your hand and we'll be happy to bring you on. Also catching questions over on our Facebook stream as well. Definitely a lot of thanks for the panel and thanks for the information, of course, as well. It's a lot of what I'm seeing right now. So forgive me as I'm trying to vacillate between 3 different screens right now. So as you see, my head may be turning and diverted to several different places. I'm running several computers and everything to try and make this happen as a shop of one on today. So definitely want to catch, I think I had 2 things in the Q&A. The first question was, I guess for you, Mr. Taylor, which is, what is the average cost of a cemetery burial? And maybe we need to deal with the 2 different maybe ways of dealing with remains, I guess whole body and cremains and burying those, and if there are any differences in costs. So that was the first question I wanted to be able to raise to you, Mr. Taylor.
Okay, first, very good question. Unfortunately, burial services are expensive. That's why there's different programs that we have that kind of help people with the putting together the packages. You do have the ability to pay over time, and there are programs that can even be extended over 60 months. The overall cost varies depending on things like where within, and I'm going to talk specifically for Maryland National, where you're going to be buried. But you're looking as about $6,000 for a burial here in the cemetery. Cremations can be a little cheaper. We have various options above ground and in ground. But I can't give a specifics because one of the things you need, I would ask the families is, do you currently have something already in place that you're going to use? And then if not, if you're starting from scratch. So you do need to talk with us. The prices will vary, but you do have the ability to lock in prices and pay over time. I think there was one other piece of that question.
No, well, I guess also looking at, is there a cost variation for cremains versus a full body? Is there a difference in cost for burial of either of those?
Yes, there is a difference in price. In fact, there's a difference between in-ground burial for full body and mausoleum burials, and the same thing for cremated remains. Cremated remains can be placed in the ground or in what we call an above ground columbarium.
Okay, the next question I have, I need to get the bishop back up of Loudoun County there, but I can come back over to him. I'm waiting for him to jump on. But Mr. Moran, I have a question for you. It says, with regards to trust, can that work with a reverse mortgage? So definitely with regards to trust, can that work with a reverse mortgage?
Well, actually, I would like to pass it over to our colleague, Ms. Griffin here. She's obviously the expert when it comes to those type of events.
Right. So one of the struggles with the reality of a trust, with the reverse mortgage, is that the reverse mortgage comes on demand like 9 months post death, or if the person who took out the reverse mortgage is no longer using that home as a principal residence. So the trust can own the property, can hold the title to the property as with a standard typical mortgage, but still know that with a secured loan, it's due. So one of the things that I encourage people to do, if at all possible, is try to get, use life insurance to pay off the reverse mortgage or plan for refinancing it. Right. So your house can have a mortgage on it when it goes into a revocable trust, but it does not defray the right for the creditor to call the loan.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question I have there, Bishop, is for how is palliative care paid for? Is it paid from health insurance or Medicare?
Should be Medicare. I don't think it's paid out of health insurance. Medicare.
Yep. A lot of these are under Medicare benefit, and we also, I think, as he touched on as well, we even do have, in extreme cases, we do have charity care as well.
Care. Yeah.
So we also want to make sure that we do let folks know that that is offered as another piece that is there. Next question that I have for you, LaVonna, is dealing with packaging versus things that we may be able to do a la carte, i.e., caskets from Costco, urns online, other things that people may want to do. And my own question in there as well, which since sometimes I know they can work, as I've sat at the table with both Mr. Taylor and Mrs. Jenkins Reed, the cost of buying a liner from a cemetery versus the funeral home. So can you all speak to that? And I guess the cost if we don't go with the pre-assembled package versus the ones where we may feel like we're getting a discount by buying some of these things online, and then maybe even the quality, if you want to speak to that as well.
So generally speaking, funeral homes that have been in business for a while have packages. I've worked at several different funeral homes, including my family's, and they offer discounts. So if you buy the package, you offer a discount. If you disassemble the package, they have the right to disassemble that discount as well. So sometimes you end up paying more getting an outside casket bought in than you would if you just got everything there. I will say I have worked with outside caskets before. One of the things I've run into is the casket arrived damaged from another company. If it arrives damaged for another company, very few offer the same benefit as the funeral home. If the casket arrives to the funeral home and we have a casket vendor already in place, they're responsible to us to come replace the casket. In that scenario, they had to buy another casket from us because it came the day before the service, and it ended up being a little more of a headache. So when you're weighing apples to apples, you have to make that consideration. I have seen some caskets come into our care that are okay. I do feel like there is about a couple companies that I would recommend as far as quality of the casket is concerned, where I wouldn't have an issue or feel like I would have an issue that comes up. Other caskets that are less expensive tend to be made less expensive. So just keep that in mind. As far as urns from Amazon, I actually said I was going to challenge myself to order a few urns from Amazon and test them out because I want to give an honest opinion. And matter of fact, Good Morning Life is a foundation with a YouTube channel that's going to talk about those on YouTube. So I will be ordering some different types of caskets from different vendors, some urns from Amazon, giving my honest opinion. Generally speaking, the funeral home will sell you a heavier urn. I definitely recommend those if you're planning to bury the urn. If you have little children, because one thing you don't want to happen is the urn tip over and break. If you're traveling, things like that. But sometimes I think it's okay to order an urn from Amazon if you can handle the way that quality of the urn is made. As far as the liner is concerned, I will say this. We started offering outside, is an out of burial container. Out of burial containers are necessary for the cemeteries in this area to help the ground from shifting in a later date or caving in on itself. They start you at a liner. So the liner is the basic version of that. You can upgrade and get a vault that helps protect the deceased as well as helps the ground from shifting. I do know we offer it at the funeral home because some of the prices became a little inflated at some of the cemeteries. And some of the cemeteries will honor the price. So we're not in necessarily the liner or out of burial container business. We just wanted to offer it to our families so they could keep some of the costs down. So I do challenge my family to take our price list and say, hey, can you price match this at the cemetery? And there's some cemeteries that are actually less expensive than ours. So I'll let you know that. So if we sit down and have that discussion, I will offer it to you. I'm pretty good about the cemeteries in this area. I'm pretty good about being honest and upfront about costs and value. I'm a value person. I will shop at the thrift store and I will shop at Bergdorf's. But I have to make sure that what you're getting is valuable for the price point that you're at. So that's just my little spiel on that.
Mr. Taylor, did you want to weigh in with anything on that as well?
Yeah, I agree. Those items are line items, so the person has an opportunity to price check. The challenge becomes the amount of time you have, the things you're doing that day, trying to get all of those. That's why if you are doing those at the time after the death, I don't know if the time and the cost is going to be a difference. We at the cemetery, just like the funeral homes, we show you our costs and you make the decision. But if you're pre-planning, that may give you a little bit better control over it. By example is if you bought a liner, and she's right, there's a difference between a liner and a vault. But if you bought one of those from I'm going to use Maryland National, many years ago, and the quality of the product increased because of a liner is now more robust, stronger, you get the latest version for what you paid for. So that's a personal decision. And the thing I want people to watch out is when you're sitting down to make arrangements at the funeral home or the cemetery, you're doing something that's going to happen in 3 to 4 days, and the timing is just going to be a lot on the person that's doing it.
Okay, thank you all. And I guess in the same way, this last question, I guess here will be for both of you all. Can you speak to the final disposition of an urn, and I guess how long, can it stay on the shelf? I'm trying to discern that piece, the last part of that question, but I guess the final disposition, and I guess the person is kind of alluding to sometimes that we've cremated somebody, we have that there, but sometimes there's not a consideration of what is done. And I know we have sat around the table and have had people that want to then put the urn with somebody else that has, just died, to have them together, different scenarios with that. So can you maybe speak to disposition of cremains? I guess I'll start with LaVonna and then I'll work over to Mr. Taylor, depending on which option people may want to choose.
So disposition of cremains, there's several. Like I said earlier, I've actually taken an urn that can actually is biodegradable, and it breaks down in the water, and we put it in the sea. So there's urns that help preserve, like I think a harder or a marble urn or a metal urn, a thick metal urn, that in my mind is better for preservation, burying, put it in a coffin burial. Glass urns, beautiful as they may be, they can last equally as long as, once again, as long as there's no children in the house, we're not traveling a lot with it. There are some thicker glass urns that I've ordered that can be buried. Once again, it came from a manufacturer that has in mind that you're burying an urn, or you want this urn to last a little while. So that's why I tend to go with products that are made or companies that's business is about funeral services or cemetery service. They have that in mind, and we've kind of learned along the way. Now, as far as preservation, this is for any thing as far as when you're putting it in the ground or above ground. What we found is the ground or what you're putting something in, goes for caskets, this goes for urns, needs to be dry. There's a history about mummification. There's a history that we've done as far as funeral services where we've exhumed bodies. And the best testament to that is if the ground is dry. So even if you buy, when you go to the cemetery, like I said, the outer burial container that either the urn goes in or the casket goes in, if that has water in it and you put a metal casket in or a wood casket, that rusts the casket, that may wilt the wood. What you want to do is make sure that your ground is dry. I do believe, and I know for a fact that cemeteries can pump the water out the ground before they put the casket on. You might want to wait a day, then put the urn or the casket in, and that helps preserve. The same thing in your house. You want to make sure that the conditions of your house are dry. You don't want to put the urn in an attic. You don't want to put, especially wood, attic, damp place, anything to help preserve it. It's across the board. It's just like anything else. So just keep that in mind when you're considering how you want to preserve. And like I said, there's scattering urns, scattering urns, biodegradable urns. There are smaller urns that are used to share with different family members. There are bigger urns. They all kind of follow the same rules that are governed out here.
And Mr. Taylor, did you have anything in terms of when it comes to the cemetery and adding on to that?
No, just the only thing I want to say is, all whether it's a casket or an urn, we put them all in vaults. They are sealed. That is really to protect the contents of that as well as the weight of the dirt on there. So she's just described exactly if you're going to do it anything other than put it as permanent location in a cemetery, those are the issues you would want to consider. But if you're going to bury them either in the ground or a columbarium unit, we accept all vessels that the families bring forward.
Well, definitely, I want to thank all of you all for participating on today. I was reading the comments, and definitely even from the angel of the house, Reverend Dr. Keith W. Byrd Sr., who was very complimentary in terms of the presentation on the day. I want to thank everyone on this panel. So from Mr. Moran, Attorney Griffin, the Bishop there of Loudoun County, as I affectionately call him, Reverend Dr. Kerry Johnson, Lavana. We will make sure we have it correct as we do there on screen, at least for you, Jenkins Reed with Good Morning Life, and Mr. Ken Taylor. Want to thank all of you all. For those who have also asked, we will see what we can do to be able to make some of the materials available to you from the PowerPoint presentation. As we get ready to sign off here, there is also an opportunity for you all to do a survey to offer your feedback on today, and we thank everyone for their time as well. Definitely, as I know the two parents on here that are on Saturday and taking care of their children, their young ones, I should say. I know that they're more than just two parents on here, but taking care of that. Definitely want to thank you all for that and this enriching conversation, which I think our community definitely needs to take seriously. In addition, I also want to thank our bereavement ministry at Zion Baptist Church, which I will say is second to none, and we do take things seriously. So I want to thank Deacon Laura Dyson. I want to thank Sister Dawn Thomas and the vessel, as I always call her, that the Lord used to get me here on this thing called Earth. My mother, E. Marlene Tolson, who I have the privilege of working with time and time again, who has a spirit of excellence and leadership in terms of taking this calling on her life very seriously. So I thank these ladies for putting it together and just putting me basically in the driver's seat on today. So definitely the shine on behind the scenes definitely goes to them as well. With that being said, I just ask God's blessings upon each and every one of you all. If you all do need contact information for these dynamic panelists, let me get them to unmute themselves so they can kind of talk about how we can reach them. Guess we will go as we did in order on today. We'll start with Mr. Moran, then Attorney Griffin. We'll keep working down the rows we presented on today. So Mr. Moran,
Excellent.
if they need to reach you, go ahead.
Yeah, you can reach me at mmoran at thelunchagency.com, or you could call me or text me directly at 410-693-3755, or you can check our website out at www.thelunchagency.com, THELYNCH agency.com. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. As you can see, my 3-year-old is in the office with me today, and we're actually having a photo shoot today with all my staff. So my entire staff is here. So we were having a brunch. I was doing 4 things at once. So,
well, amen for you doing all of those. Well, let me just get you, as we learned, at least in radio, when I did that in my undergrad days, you do it twice. So that way the people that are writing it down, let's get that information one more time.
Yeah. So again, you can reach me at mmoran, so MMORAND at thelynchagency.com, THELYNCH agency.com.
Okay, and just to remind folks that he will help you on the financial side of life. And then Attorney Griffin.
Our URL, the easy one, is yourestateplanningатtorney.com. Again, yourestateplanningattorney.com. And our phone number is 855-574-8481.
Thank you so much. And then the bishop there of Loudoun County, pastor of New Life Church, Sterling.
Pastor CEJ at yahoo.com. Pastor CEJ at yahoo.com.
And then Miss Lavana Jenkins Reed, part of this dynamic African-American funeral presence here in the Washington, D.C. area.
You can find me at Johnson & Jenkins Funeral Home, 202-882-8800, or johnsonandjenkinsfh.com. Again, that's 202-882-8800, johnsonandjenkinsfh.com. You can reach me directly at 202-812-9190. You can leave a voice message or text me. My email address directly to me is jreedfc, yes, @gmail.com. That's jreed, and Reed is REID. F is a Frank, C is a cat, @gmail.com. Also, you can find me on YouTube at Good Morning Life. And morning is MOURNINIG. Also on Instagram and Facebook at Good Morning Life. Thank you.
And Mr. Taylor, how can we reach you, sir? Make sure you unmute there.
There it is. Okay, thank you. Maryland National Memorial Park, the phone number is, and this is for those who are recording it, you should see, but it's 301-210-6464. That's Maryland National Memorial Park. Just ask for Ken, or anyone there could help you. And if you search it online, you can find it Maryland National Memorial Park in Laurel.
Yes, indeed. Well, I definitely, again, I want to thank you all again for all that you did to bring to the table. And again, the angels that have worked behind the scenes to put this together today, definitely want to thank them as well. So don't want that credit to come to me. I definitely want to make sure that they get the credit for today. So with that, I ask God's benediction and blessings upon each of you on the remainder of this day. If you all would like as well, please join us in worship on tomorrow morning. If you do not have a place to worship at the 10:15 hour, ziondc.org, or you can join us on our YouTube or Facebook page, and you can be a part of a worship experience like no other and hear from the under shepherd of our house, the Reverend Dr. Keith W. Byrd Sr. So with that, may the Lord keep you safe and secure on today. May the rest of the day and this weekend be a blessing to each and every one of you all, and God's blessings upon all of you all. Thank you again. Thank you for your time. Thank you, panel, for your expertise, and blessings upon each and every one of you all. Have an amazing day.